Family dinners used to mean safety to me. They were loud, imperfect, filled with overlapping conversations and half-finished stories. I believed that no matter what happened in the outside world, my son would always be protected at that table. Surrounded by blood, surrounded by love, that illusion shattered on a quiet Sunday evening. The dining room smelled of roasted chicken and rosemary. I'd spent the afternoon cooking, not because anyone demanded it, but because I wanted the night to feel warm. Normal, my son sat beside me, his small shoulders slightly hunched, swinging his legs under the chair. He counted his peas before eating them, always 6 at a time, a habit that soothed him. My brother arrived late, as usual, loud and confident, his voice filling the room before his presence did. He kissed our mother's cheek, ignored me, and ruffled my son's hair a little too roughly. So, he said once everyone was seated, swirling his wine, "How's school going?" I felt my stomach tighten. My son hesitated. He glanced at me before answering, the way he always did when he wasn't sure if he'd say the wrong thing. "It's okay, still struggling with reading," my brother pressed, smiling like it was harmless curiosity. "He's improving," I said quickly. "He just learns differently." That should have been the end of it. Instead, my brother laughed, not loudly worse, soft and mocking, like a private joke he expected everyone to understand. "Differently," he repeated. "That's a nice word for it. Guess not everyone's cut out to keep up, huh?" The room went quiet. I felt my son stiffen beside me. His fork stopped midair. He stared at his plate, cheeks slowly turning red. I waited for anyone, to say something, to redirect the conversation, to protect him. My sister-in-law looked away. My mother cleared her throat, and my husband smiled. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. That smile hurt more than the words. "Well," my brother continued, leaning back, "good thing not everyone depends on their brains to succeed. Some people are just lucky." A few chuckles followed. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. "He's a child," I said, my voice steady only because I forced it to be. "And he's doing his best." My brother shrugged. "Hey, I'm just saying, if you're paying all that money for schools, you'd hope for better results. At least my daughter makes it worth the tuition." That was the moment something cracked inside me, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to change everything. I looked down at my son. He was carefully pushing his peas into straight lines now, the way he did when he was overwhelmed. He didn't cry. He didn't defend himself. He simply made himself smaller. No one stopped it. No one stood up. And I realized then that the table I thought would protect him was the very place he was being sacrificed for comfort, pride, and cruel jokes disguised as honesty. That night, as I tucked him into bed, he whispered, "Uncle was joking, right?" I kissed his forehead, swallowing the ache in my chest. "Yes," I said softly, "but some jokes tell the truth." And that was the night I stopped believing family always meant love. I didn't announce my decision. There was no dramatic phone call, no confrontation, no final warning. I simply sat at my desk one morning, stared at the familiar banking app, and canceled the tuition payment I had been sending every month for nearly 5 years. Just like that, it was over. My brother's daughter attended one of the best private schools in the city. The kind with polished hallways, small class sizes, and banners boasting acceptance rates. Everyone assumed my brother paid for it himself. No one ever mentioned that it was my income, my overtime, my sacrifices that made it possible. I told myself I wasn't being cruel. I was being fair. If my son's worth could be laughed at, then my generosity could be withdrawn. The first call came 2 days later. "You forgot to send the payment," my brother said, his tone sharp, not confused. "I didn't forget," I replied calmly. I stopped. There was a pause, then a short laugh. "Stop joking. I'm not." His voice changed instantly. "You can't do this. The school will penalize us." "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said. "You always do." I hung up before he could respond. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it was the beginning of a war I never asked for. My phone buzzed constantly. My mother cried about family responsibility. My sister-in-law sent long messages about how children shouldn't suffer for adult misunderstandings. Even cousins weighed in, reminding me how fortunate I was and how ungrateful I sounded. No one asked about my son. No one mentioned the dinner. At home, the atmosphere shifted. My husband grew distant in a way I couldn't quite name. He wasn't angry, he was careful. He watched his words, avoided my eyes. When I brought up the tuition, he sighed like I was exhausting him. "You didn't have to go that far," he said one night while rinsing dishes. "It was just a joke." "It wasn't," I replied. "And you know that." He didn't answer, just turned the water on louder. That silence followed me everywhere. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The way he defended my brother in conversations. The way he brushed off my son's struggles as phases. The way he once said, without malice but without love either, "Some kids just make life harder." I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my son's quiet breathing drifting from down the hall. Was I overreacting? Was I being emotional? That word again, emotional, always used to soften cruelty and excuse it. Then the school called, not my brother's child's school, my son's. His teacher spoke gently, praising his effort, his creativity, his progress. She talked about how he helped other kids feel included, how he built stories even when reading them was hard. I cried after hanging up, because someone finally saw him. That afternoon, my brother showed up at my door unannounced. His face was tight with anger, not concern. "You're ruining my family," he said, "all because you're sensitive." I looked past him, imagining my son hearing those words. "No," I said quietly, "I'm choosing mine." He scoffed, "You'll regret this." As I closed the door, my hands shook, not from fear, but from clarity. Something was wrong, deeper than tuition, deeper than one cruel dinner. And I had a growing, terrifying feeling that the person standing closest to me wasn't on my side at all. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, disguised as small inconsistencies I could no longer ignore. A missing receipt. A vague explanation. My husband coming home later than usual, with no real story to explain why. I wasn't looking for betrayal. I wasn't suspicious by nature, but once doubt takes root, it grows even in silence. It started with the bank account. I logged in one afternoon to check a utility payment and noticed a transfer I didn't recognize. The amount wasn't huge, small enough to be dismissed, but the name stopped me cold. It was my brother's. I told myself there had to be a reason. Still, my hands trembled as I scrolled. One transfer became several, monthly, consistent, quiet. I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. That evening, I asked my husband gently, the way you ask when you're hoping to be wrong. "Why are there payments going to my brother?" He didn't look surprised. He didn't look ashamed either. "He needed help," he said. "You cut him off, so you replaced me." I asked, he sighed, rubbing his temples. I was trying to keep the peace. That answer didn't sit right. Peace for who? Later that night, while folding laundry in our bedroom, his laptop chimed with an email notification. He was in the shower. The screen lit up with his name and my brother's. I know I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. "She's overreacting," my husband had written. "You know how she is with him. He's just different. We can't keep pretending he's normal forever." The word normal felt like a slap. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. "I'll cover the tuition until things settle down. She doesn't need to know right now. It's better this way." Better for who? I sat on the edge of the bed, laptop heavy in my hands, my entire marriage rearranging itself in my mind. Every silence, every dismissal, every time he had minimized my son to make others comfortable. When my husband came out of the bathroom, towel slung over his shoulder, he froze. "You read it," he said. "It wasn't a question. Do you agree with him?" I asked quietly. "Do you believe our son is a burden?" He hesitated. That pause told me everything. "I just think life would be easier if you were more realistic," he said finally. "Not everyone can be exceptional." I laughed then, a short broken sound that surprised us both. "He's exceptional to me," I said. "And that should have been enough for you." He reached for me, panic flashing across his face. "I didn't mean it like that." "But you wrote it like that," I replied. That night, I slept in my son's room, curled on the floor beside his bed. I watched his chest rise and fall, his lashes resting softly against his cheeks. This child, kind, thoughtful, trying every day, had been reduced to a problem behind my back, by the man who promised to protect him. In the darkness, something hardened inside me, not hatred, resolve. I stopped crying. I stopped explaining. I stopped hoping he'd suddenly understand, because love doesn't need translation, and betrayal, once named, doesn't need forgiveness to lose its power. By morning, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. I wasn't about to beg for respect. I was going to take back everything they thought I'd quietly surrender. I didn't explode. That seemed to disappoint them the most. Instead of shouting or begging or trying to prove my pain was valid, I became calm, focused, dangerous in the way only someone who has finished grieving can be. The first thing I did was separate our finances. I opened a new account in my name only and redirected my income there. I documented every transfer my husband had made to my brother. Dates, amounts, messages attached. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because clarity is power, and I had spent too many years giving mine away. Then I found my son a new school, not one that measured children by how quickly they read or how neatly they fit into expectations, but one that celebrated difference. His teachers spoke about creativity, patience, and growth, not deficiencies. For the first time, my son came home smiling without apology. That alone was worth everything. A week later, I invited everyone to dinner. My brother, my mother, my husband, the same table, the same dishes, the same careful calm that had once been mistaken for weakness. Midway through the meal, my brother began talking about tuition again, his voice tight with forced humor. Guess private school's a luxury these days. I smiled. It always was. I stood and placed a small stack of papers on the table. Bank statements, emails, proof. I won't be paying tuition anymore. I said evenly, not for your child, and not secretly through my husband either. My husband went pale. My mother gasped. You went through my emails, he asked. You went through my trust. I replied. I turned to my brother. You mocked my son at this table. You laughed at his struggles while benefiting from my generosity. That ends today. He opened his mouth, but no words came. I'm filing for separation. I continued, my voice steady, and I'm reclaiming every dollar that was taken without my consent. The silence was thick, uncomfortable, deserved. I didn't mean it like that. My husband whispered, you meant it quietly. I said, that's worse. I didn't stay for dessert. I took my son home, tucked him into bed, and kissed his forehead. He looked up at me with wide eyes. Did I do something wrong? No, I said firmly. You did everything right. In the weeks that followed, my life grew quieter. Some family members stopped calling. Others tried to guilt me into reconciliation. I ignored them all. Peace doesn't argue for its place. My son began thriving. He read slowly, but proudly. He talked more. He laughed freely. The weight he'd been carrying, one I hadn't even fully seen, began to lift. One afternoon, he brought home a drawing. It was of the two of us standing side by side. Above our heads, he'd written carefully, letter by letter, safe. I cried then, not from pain, but relief. They thought my silence meant compliance. They thought my kindness meant weakness. They thought I'd keep paying to be tolerated. They were wrong. My revenge wasn't loud or cruel. It was walking away with my dignity, my child's confidence, and a future no one else got to define. And that was sweeter than any apology they never planned to give. Seedlings.